Hey guys, my name is Charles Marati. I'm going to show you how to install the Midi 1885 servo today from Promodeler. If you have any questions about this video, please feel free to hit me up on Facebook, Messenger, or hellfirerc@gmail.com. Thanks again, and let's get started. So I've got a Promodeler Midi 1885 servo that I'm going to show how to install today. We're using my own personal truck. I'm going to go ahead and take it out and then reinstall it so that you can see it forwards and backwards. So if we go ahead and start off by removing all your electronics and screws that you'll need to. Go ahead and get this top brace off. Big thanks to my good friend Luke Parker for filming this today, and also John Beach from Promodeler for just being a great help all the way around. You know, this hobby is pretty cool, and he definitely wants to put out some quality product, especially in servo, because standard servo is definitely not something that is going to last. So top brace off, set that to the side, and then we're going to remove just a handful of screws. I do use titanium screws for the ones holding the front bulkhead to the chassis, and we've got to remove the servo steering link. I don't know if you can see on this side right here. All right, and then we have two screws here in the chassis, and then I have the ESC being held down with a couple of screws as well. So and then these last two screws right here. These little button head screws sometimes get stuck in there. You know, we use a magnetic tool retriever. Just like that. And now we're going outside. Put this back in the way. All right, so we've got the center skid off of the truck, and now you can see the Midi in here. It fits. I don't know if you can get into that angle to see that there is still a gap there. Does not contact the servo, and this is with a thicker Integy shaft. If you use the stock one, there's an even larger gap. There we go. And now the front end is off. All right, now right here, you're going to see down here where the forks are. This is actually what has to be done. You have to take out the base plate of the front bulkhead. And you're going to see that brand new, this plate right here has to be removed just to the level of where this line is. And as you can see right here, that's where that's at. So I'm going to flip it over, same thing. Go ahead and just pause for a moment there and put the video on pause if you need to really get a good idea of what you're removing. So if you see right here, you do need to remove this stand-up part of the front bulkhead. That whole part needs to come off so that it looks like this. We're still retaining the mounting positions so that it holds in, A lot of people have questions as to stability. The actual servo itself becomes part of the structural integrity, so it's not necessary anymore. You know, when you're not using adapters to fit it and it's a direct fit in there, it makes a big difference, and it adds to the structural integrity of how it's all held together. And I have not had an issue with center shafts. I've not had an issue with the servo coming loose or wobbling out. Everything is secure in there, and I bashed pretty hard. Okay, so let's go ahead and get this shaft out. There's our connector. That can stay in there. All right, so then we're now going to take out the 3 screws here to remove the servo. And there it is. Comes out. Okay. Flip over here. I don't want to pull too hard because I still have it plugged in to the receiver at the moment. Now, for the sake of not having to remove all of my receiver and electronics equipment out of here, you can simply just know that this plugs straight into channel 1. And once that's threaded through, you'll also need to thread through the power line, the power connector and the lead that also is on the Midi. Midi comes with 2 wires. This one is strictly for power. The other one is going to be for your signal. Now there is some nominal voltage that does come from the receiver to the servo, but it is actually, it's irrelevant. It doesn't make a difference. It doesn't impact the servo. So plug it straight into channel 1, and then you'll power your servo with this lead. It's an XT30. It's an XT30 male connector. You'll use a LiPo or a lithium ion pack. It can run on as little as a 2S pack, which is right here. This is a 2000 milliamp 10C discharge lithium ion. You focus right there where it says lithium ion. That's a lithium ion pack, not a LiPo pack. I just like these a little better for things like servo application. They hold charge a lot longer. They're quite a bit more stable than a LiPo. They don't swell up and explode and stuff like that. Okay, so we've already got it pulled through. You will need to Dremel out a little bit more space to pull the XT30 through, but we're talking a small amount. Here are the RotoZip bits that are used to cut the front bulkhead. They look just like this. You can get them in a pack of, I don't know, I think it was 5 or something. I think it was like 10 bucks or something like that. But this can be used to cut straight through. It's used to cut tiles, so it's plenty sharp enough and it'll do the job. Just use, of course, goggles and whatever other protective equipment you need so you don't cut yourself. Likewise, you can also use Dremel cutting bits. Same thing. It's just these are discs and they work pretty good too. Just little discs that you put in and they cut straight through like butter. There's also the ones that are just this material and they cut just as well. So I haven't really seen that this one does any significance over in plastic over the normal ones, but these are used for metal too. All right, so then back to it. We're going to go ahead and just reassemble this. Push that back over. Sometimes the hardest part is getting all of the wires if you have a lot going on in your truck. Now, I use these little standoffs. They're just really small ones. These are, I believe, 3 millimeter, and they just are there for this plate. And I raise it up with these plastic standoffs for the ESC so that I can run the wires underneath. And that's just personal preference. Everybody has their own way of doing that, and there's not really a wrong way. All right, so then now we can secure our servo back into its position. I'm going to flip it on the side again. Let's flip it all the way over now that we have the ESC secured in there. Now you see it snaps right in. Everything is good to go there. Now that it's snapped in, we're good to go and start putting the screws in. Again, I'm just going to remind everybody, you do not need to modify the center chassis at all. The center chassis doesn't require any modification. The only thing we're doing is removing the base plate on the front bulkhead to allow the Midi servo to fit onto the base portion of the truck. Now everything's a tight fit, but it doesn't make contact, and again, there were no modifications onto the center chassis. Just want to make sure that's clear. I'm going to go ahead and screw these back in so that we are good to go there. Now I've actually put a servo in without putting these back on before, just racing through it, and yeah, it doesn't end well. So these things are important. For certain things, I'll use power tools. For certain other things, like to use just a hand hex, like these MIP ones. They're pretty good. I don't use the ball end hex on the hand tools, simply because if I'm using a hand tool, I want it to be precise. I want it to be direct, and I want to make sure it's making good contact, because there's a reason for me doing this. I don't want to strip these ever. And if I do, then it's going to be tough getting it out and not damaging the other components. So just to the point where it doesn't really want to move on its own. And then now, and put these parts back in. Don't forget your connector. Done that before too. All right. Oh, for anybody using one of these center braces, if you're going to use an N-to-G shaft, you need to use a different bearing size in the brace, whether it's the real brace, the brace V2, the brace, doesn't matter. It's a 13 by 19 by 4 as opposed to 12 by 19 by 4 for the stock shaft. Went through a lot of bearings trying to find the right size. All right, we'll test there, we're good to go. And this servo horn is not the normal one that's used, not the 25 tooth. This is a 15 tooth servo horn created by John Beach at Promodeler. This is a normal 25 tooth spline for a 25 tooth output gear on a standard servo. This, by comparison, is the 15 tooth one that needs to be used with the Midi exclusively. Now, you can get any 15 tooth servo arm or horn that you want, but this one is the real deal. This is what's going to fit into the capture bearing and into the capture area, so that this doesn't move horizontally or laterally, and it's going to last a lot longer. Once this thing is secured, it's really not going to come off. I mean, that's what this thing was made for. So definitely use the right servo horn with this servo. Like, I would not try to use an arm like that. Even though it's 15 tooth, it's not going to last because of the lateral movement. It's going to wiggle off. Now right here, if you want to focus in on this, this is the part that people start to get nervous about, right? Well, look at that. Fits right in. No problem. All the way through.
You can see daylight through there.
Yep. So we're good. Okay. Now let's go ahead and turn the wheels. Yep. Power transfer's there. Everything's in order. So now we can go ahead and flip it over. Man, my truck's dirty. Okay, so then we'll go ahead and just go back in the order in which we started, which was putting in the chassis screws, these two. These are just the 14 millimeter button head and 4 screws. Putting the screws back in as we go in the order that I took them out. You'll notice that 3 of these screws are identical, and then there's one that's not. This one right here is just being used right here on the Servo Saver support brace. I do that because on the 25 there's only about 4 or 5 millimeters of bite. I prefer to have a little bit more, and the front bulkhead and chassis cross hatching together, it allows for it, but it does not allow for it on the front positions here. I'm using 25 millimeter grade 5 titanium screws for this position here. Now 30 millimeters is being used on the Servo Saver support brace, and I'm doing that because I've learned that if I don't use a longer one, it tends to start wiggling loose, and this is really just to get more bite and downward force, because this Servo Saver brace is intended to push down on the steering assembly so that it doesn't wiggle loose, and it just makes for better, more precise steering all the way around. Plus there's less likely to be damage from loose components that start to transfer elsewhere. So go ahead and tighten those down now. Put the drag all the way down. We don't want to screw this in too fast, so again with the hand tools, just going to tighten them down a little bit. Now the reason why you want to go slower when you're putting a screw in is simply for heat. Titanium doesn't transfer the heat nearly as bad as steel, but it'll start melting the plastic, and you'll notice that there won't be that little when you hit the drag point on your power tool because you've already melted it. So another little tidbit there. I'm just going to, this is the hardest part for me. This is where I struggle. Just trying to get this little guy lined up in there. I don't know if anybody else has this issue or if it's just me, but it just does not like me for some reason.
What are you trying to do?
There we go. Just trying to get this lined up so I can put the screw in to capture it. Yeah, that's what I did before. Yeah, still doing it. Last time you spin, last time I spin, try to get like this. Yeah, probably lower than I spin. That's what I don't want to do. I don't like to do so. This is actually one before jump each. Which is why I'm wearing a promodeler hat. Yeah, a little bit about that. So, those of you who don't know me, I've been doing RC for quite some time, I've been my life, and X-Maxx came out and kind of certain just once again, I've forgotten how to with this and it's a lot of fun, but there was sort of way back when fuel life was a thing. And the article, it's not long ago, but that was pretty amazing, and the amount of torque, consistency, force, all those things really kind of made this into its very great fun volume. And you can get some really incredible sensor and power that you can plus the nylon composite that these are chassis and chuck out there. I don't get much I've never thought that they'd be that big for what you put in. And now we can put the top brace back on. Okay, so now everything's tucked away. Let's go ahead and get this plugged in. We'll turn on our controller first. Power up our other stuff. So got everything plugged in, and go ahead and turn that on. All right, so then let's go ahead and test. Servo looks good. Let's give it some throttle. Good. We can start ripping. Let's put it on the ground because there's always going to be somebody that wants to know how does it turn with the wheels on the ground. Every servo's fast when it's lifting. So here we are. Okay, so there's your proof. This thing will rip. Hey guys, thanks for watching. Appreciate you staying all the way to the end with me. If you did like this video, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. And there's going to be a lot more coming your way. If you got any questions, please feel free to reach out to me directly. You can hit me up on hellfirerc@gmail.com. And of course, I'm on the Facebook forums and groups. Don't forget, I also have my own page, Fix My X-Maxx, on Facebook. Thanks again.